All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and do another review video, kind of in the same vein of the Jeff Nippert smartest push-pull legs, and then that #1 deadlift article that I reviewed the other day that wasn't the best. But today we're going to be taking a look at Smolov Jr., specifically for squat and bench press. Now, typically when you talk about these two training programs, because they're basically the same thing, it's just one you run it for squat, one you run it for bench. But typically you'll find when you talk about it or you see it talked about in strength and conditioning circles, it's almost taken as somewhat of a meme for a couple reasons. And there are some key criticisms that have merit, but you have to understand why those things are, so then you can adjust them to make it work for you, instead of just saying, oh, this is shit, and not understanding why. Because it's really easy to, or it should be really easy to identify something and see that it doesn't work for you. But it takes more critical thinking to see if you can adjust it to make it fit to whatever you're trying to do. And ultimately the goal with Smolov Jr., whether you're using it for bench or squat or overhead press, which I might cover in another video, Smolov Jr. for overhead press. The goal is to put a lot of strength on in a very short amount of time. A lot of guys, depending upon their body weight, strength experience, so on and so forth, it's very common for them to put on 40 pounds to either of those lifts. One of the main things, though, just beyond the fact that it's incredibly difficult, you're doing a lot of heavy volume, you're benching and squatting 4 times per week. There's overuse injuries that make it somewhat of a meme, I would say. Just when you talk with regards to like the base program itself. The reason why that is because, like I said, there's just a lot of fatiguing volume. You're doing a lot of sets with a relatively high percentage of your 1 rep max to start off with. And then you're just compounding that by adding 5 pounds, 10 pounds every week. Whatever the case may be. And you're doing that as written on the regular Smolov Jr. Training prescription. You're doing that with just regular bench press and just squat. It's 2021, guys. We know that you cannot do ascending percentages of your 1 rep max, meaning it would be one thing if you started off at, let's just say 90% and then you tapered down to 70%. And then just kind of stayed there and chilled there for a little bit. You're tapering down to 70% on the Smolov Jr. program, but then you're ratcheting right back up to 85%. So there's really no time for you to truly utilize the biological law of accommodation, such that either you change the movement or you change the parameter in which you do the movement. It just doesn't work that way practically when you do it like this, especially when you're doing it for just so many freaking reps. And doing it so often. One of the things that, because you'll always find those people that are, they're shit brick houses and they're made out of steel cable and fucking they're a human bicep, so they just don't get injured. Failing all those other things, the main thing in those instances that just stops it from being something that a lot of people try is that it's difficult to keep the strength gains that you make on it. Reason being is that you are using such an enormous training stimulus to acquire this strength that once you pull it back and you just start training normally, typically guys won't hang on to 100% of the gains that they make on this program. And then it may taper down. So let's say you did an amazing job, you're a hyper responder to the program. You gained 60 pounds on your squat, and then you ran it for bench, and you gained 40 pounds on your bench. A lot of guys, if their training isn't up to par after they do this program, they may only hold on to half of that. So then it's like, I broke myself for 20 pounds. All very valid criticisms, by the way. I would never, if someone were to tell me, hey, like, I'm really trying to increase my squat or my bench, I would never just ever tell them to do anything like Smolov Jr., like the base programming, without modifying it. This will be a little bit of a case study as well, because after I go through and review this, that was basically the review. We'll go through the program just shortly in terms of the sets and reps and so on. But this will be kind of a case study too, because I did have an instance where I had actually 2 clients of mine that wanted to increase their squat. They had different strength levels. They'll probably watch this video and comment down below to chime in just how brutal it still was. They had different strength levels, different types of equipment, and different schedules just in general. And they basically, like, I'm gonna be honest, guys, when you watch this, y'all were crying to get that squat increase. You were pressed on time. You just didn't want to be patient, which is fine. So I made it work for them. I knew that the best way to acquire strength is to train, obviously, with the closest proximity to your 1 rep max as you possibly can. And the more volume you can do at that, the better. So obviously, looking into fucking Russian weightlifting programs where they have you do exactly that was kind of where I started off in terms of like the skeleton. But with my experience with training and as a strength and conditioning coach, I adjusted it to fit their needs. Neither of them got any injuries. They definitely still had to be in a calorie surplus, and all the other things that are intrinsic to Smolov, like you're not going to do this while you're cutting. You might be able to do it if you're maintaining, if you're a relatively high body fat, but if you're cutting or you're a lean individual, this failing everything else that you do to reduce injury, it's still probably going to injure you. And it worked for him. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the sets and reps on the base program, and then we're going to flip right over to, and this isn't even what I had them do specifically, which you'll see in a second. It's just something to where I'm going through that same thought process that I did and making kind of just like a general prescription that anybody could use and thought processes that I go through so that, hey, you can use this template that I'm going to leave in the comment section and in the description, but by also using these thought processes, you can change anything on here to fit your needs or whatever level of equipment you have, your work schedule, whatever the case may be. So, it's a 4-day a week, and that week can be 7 days, 10 days. Your training split doesn't necessarily have to be 7 days. That's something we'll talk about in a little bit. It's 4 days, 3 weeks, and you're either benching or you're squatting each of those days. And that's it. So you're doing 6 sets of 6 reps. That is at 70%. 7 sets of 5 reps at 75. 8 sets of 4 at 80%, and 10 sets of 3 at 85. That is a lot. Not necessarily on your first 2 days, because those are both pretty sub-maximal. And they're there by design to reduce training stress for your 2 heavier days on Friday and Saturday. But there's an area of opportunity there that we're going to talk about when we flip over to that next, that template that I made. And that's it. Like, you're doing 30 reps at 85%. Now just imagine that's an equivalent workload to doing 3 sets of 10 at 67 or 70%, but you're just doing it with 85%. Now just imagine that you have to come back on Monday, and even though it's light, you got to bench again. So you likely beat yourself into the dirt this first week, and you got to hopefully not injure yourself on Monday. Depending upon the individual, results will vary, because a lot of people, especially for the bench version of this program, will say like, dude, I tore my pec. I blew my tricep out. It's not funny, but it's just fucked up, because so many people just get destroyed by this program because I don't know the history behind it, but I am certain that it was made for individuals with certain medical enhancements. Like, motherfuckers took steroids more than likely. Ain't too much to say. It's pretty much a simple beat the crap out of yourself program. One thing that they say that I do not agree with at all, and that's kind of what we'll talk about here before we flip over, which is this is a huge area of opportunity. They make the blanketed statement, and I'll just read it. Accessory work. It is typically recommended to avoid doing accessory work doing a Smolov cycle. Again, just with the week-to-week weight increments, you can use the way your body feels to make a judgment call here. Sticking exclusively with the squats and or bench will take you a long way, though. If you decide to mix in a little accessory work, keep it brief. Okay, two things wrong with that. One, and this is just intrinsic to the program, but just exclusively sticking with squats and bench press is a good way to acquire an injury, especially when you do it with that much frequency, with that much intensity. And if you're anything like me, you're just not a shit brick house. Not naturally. My tendons, my joints, everything is like normal human level. I'm not a superhuman. And I'm not on steroids. And probably if you're watching this video, you're not either. The main thing to talk about, though, is the lack of accessory work. That is not a good idea when you're hammering a specific movement pattern like this. And what world is not working your upper back, your lats, and your rear delts not a smart idea if you're bench pressing 4 times a week? So you're going to get anteriorly biased, meaning your posture is going to slump forward over time. You're overusing these muscles without working the antagonist muscles. Your synovial fluid's not getting really sloshed around your joints the way it would if you were following a more balanced training program. And you're more than likely, all of the slight leverage advantages that you get from having strong rear delts, a strong upper back, a strong ability to plant your upper traps in your neck into the bench press when you're doing it, all of those things are going to diminish over time. So it's not a smart idea to not do those things. I completely disagree with that. It's well-intentioned, just because what it's saying is that you want to give most of your energy to the squatting and bench pressing, which is true. But making a blanket statement like that is just not practical for most individuals. And likewise for the squats. So when you're doing squats, you also want to include some token level of not only like rehab and prehab exercises that are accessories, but also hamstring and lower back work as well. So it's an age-old story for sprinters or gym bros that only work their quads, that they typically will get knee injuries or their hamstring will blow out. Why? Because they don't work their hamstrings. So obviously, with this much volume, you should be working your hamstrings. And that doesn't mean you do deadlifts on this program. I think that's what it's trying to say, because whenever this was conceptualized, hamstrings were never really thought of as a muscle group that you would just train on its own. It's like, okay, you train your hamstrings through Romanian deadlifts, through regular deadlifts, through good mornings, through these compound movements. And yeah, if you do that on this program, you're probably going to fuck yourself up. But you could just do a hamstring curl. You can take a hamstring curl to damn near failure and it not impact your ability throughout the week to recover and to be able to squat again on Monday. Likewise, the hamstring curls also work as an insurance policy, because like I stated, your hamstrings are weak, you're squatting often, something goes wrong, you're gonna destroy your knee. You're gonna tear a hamstring, whatever the case may be. Likewise with your lower back. And this is just more of like a pump blood into your lower back to make it feel better kind of thing. It's a smart idea to do some sort of lightweight lower back work for a lot of reps, just as prehab and rehab. No accessory work is not a good idea. So, with all those things being said, I just want to make sure there's nothing else that we need to still go through. Smolov is good at what it does. It's kind of like a high risk, high reward kind of thing. My goal with the 2021 version of it is to make it a high reward, as low of a risk as it can be kind of thing. So your ability to get through my version of the program will not be dependent upon necessarily if you get injured or not. Now, injury is always possible. I'm not a charlatan. I'm not going to say that nothing can happen to where you can't get injured. But this is more of like a bulletproof Smolov. I think that's what I'll call it, actually. Bulletproof Smolov, 2021 version. I'll put that in the video title. The idea is to use just enough accessory work to keep things as strong as they need to be and to kind of have like an insurance policy with regards to common injuries that you get in terms of overuse. Now I'm going to flip over to the program and we'll start with bench. So it's going to start with bench here, and then I skip 2 lines, and then we go into our squat day. Programming considerations. And they don't say this on the Smolov base program, but there are days that are more fatiguing than others. So you want to kind of think of it within that regard and then organize your accessories accordingly. So there's 4 bench days. That makes your first bench day with your lightest percentage in your 1 rep max and the least amount of volume, your quaternary bench day. It goes tertiary, secondary, and then primary. We're going to start with, and this will apply to either squat or bench, right? So what I'm about to say is going to apply to either. For your quaternary bench or your quaternary squat, you're going to start off with a movement that either reduces range of motion or reduces overall central fatigue in the case of the squat. So just to talk about the bench press first. As I talked about in a lot of my other previous videos, your level of fatigue that you generate on a bench press is directly dependent upon what your natural range of motion on it is. So, if you're an individual that, say, has a below parallel range of motion bench press like myself, to where you're several inches longer range of motion than someone with a parallel bench press, you're going to pick the floor press. It reduces the range of motion, and it's just going to take less stress off. It's going to take stress off your pecs because your pec minor, your shoulder, everything is going through a diminished level of retraction. The exertion is matched. So as you notice, I didn't change anything about the exertion. That intensity and that volume is the main driver of what increases your strength on a program like this. It's not necessarily the specificity. Although you want to keep specificity as close to the competition movement that you're training as possible, that doesn't fucking mean you do the same thing 4 days in a row. That's moronic. Honestly, in today's meta of strength and conditioning training, that's not something you do and expect any sort of results from it. Long term anyway. So that's for your below parallel bench presser. If you're a parallel or above parallel bench presser, you're going to use a board press. The idea is to just reduce the range of motion that your pec minor, your upper back, all that has to go through. So if, like I said, you're a parallel ROM bench presser, you're going to pick the board press that gives you, it could be like a 1 or 2 board press. The idea is that you're removing range of motion. Everything else is kept the same, though, in terms of intensity, sets, reps. Accessories. You still want to have a rowing variation. Now, if you're going to a commercial gym, preferably that would be some sort of cable rows. But if you're training at home, you could get away with doing a barbell row, I would say, but just keep it really strict. So the idea of this is to take like a bodybuilding approach. You're not trying to use the most amount of weight that you can. You're trying to stimulate the target muscles. So don't load up 300 pounds on a Pendlay row and Romanian deadlift it up, jerk your upper back or jerk your hips into extension, and then call it a Pendlay row. You're generating all this extra fatigue that's going to bleed into these other days. And this shit is important when you're bench pressing with this much intensity, that you do your due diligence with your form on these accessories. Don't do that cheat row bullshit. Call it a Pendlay row and then write me saying, oh, well, this program's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. No, your form is bullshit. Take accountability. Tangent, because a lot of people on YouTube will typically do Pendlay rows and cheat it up and call it a strict row. Don't do that here. That's going to get you hurt. Cable row is the best. Pendlay row, you can get away with it. Preferably that would be in the case of like someone that doesn't have access to a cable row. I would want you to do an inverted row where your legs are inclined so you can get a full range of motion on your pecs, upper back, your rear delt, so on and so forth. These are all done with 2 reps in reserve. That's a pretty safe rep range and intensity level to work with these accessories in particular. Reverse curls and hammer curls are going to be really important though for honestly keeping your elbow healthy when you're bench pressing with this much weight relative to your 1 rep max with this much frequency. It's a must. Do not skip the curls. If you have to skip anything, skip maybe the upper back movement on the tertiary bench day. Don't skip the curls, dude. Don't be lazy. You're already going to the gym and breaking yourself with the bench press. Do some fluff work. You don't even have to follow the 2 reps in reserve prescription if it's just like, oh, well, I already benched, so I don't feel like pushing myself on curls. Okay. Find any 2 dumbbells and just do a lot of reps with them. That's the main point of these movements, is to keep everything in there just warm, your synovial fluid in your elbows to get that going, and to just make sure that you don't get any tendinitis issues. Because you probably will if you're not accustomed to doing this much frequency after like the 2nd or 3rd week, if you don't do your due diligence to reduce indicators that would make that happen. So that's your quaternary bench day. Tertiary. The idea with this is to use a self-limiting version of your squat or bench press that has far less overall loading than whatever competition style bench or squat that you're using. So in the case of the bench press, it's a 3 Mississippi count pause bench. I promise you guys, if you do a 3 Mississippi count pause bench where you 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, push, it's going to be a lot lower than whatever your best bench press is. A safe estimate would be to take 85% of your best bench press and then take 75% of that. So by the way, don't just use 70% of your 1 rep max and then apply it to floor press, competition bench, Larson press, so on and so forth. You take 70% of your max floor press or board press, 75% of your 3 Mississippi count pause bench, 80% of your competition style bench, and then 85% of your Larson or your feet up bench. You don't just take 100, whatever percentage of the competition lift and then apply it to these variations. You still do have to know what your maxes are on these approximately. Or if you want to go back and watch some of my other videos where I give you kind of starting places to calculate your projected 1 rep maxes on these, you can. Those are good bets, and it'll give you an idea of where to start at. Accessories for the tertiary bench day. Just vertical pulling, a lot of upper back. We're pushing these kind of hard. The main thing that I want to talk about though is the reverse band bench press, or if you can't set that up, the broomstick bench. The idea with this, and I got this from Dave Tate from whenever he told a story about how when he was younger and destroyed his pec, and how he kind of rehabbed his tricep and his pec tendon. He used a reverse band bench press. The idea is to use something with as little loading on your muscles as possible so that you can just push as much blood into your tendons and your ligaments as possible, because blood flow doesn't typically go to those things. They don't have veins. They're not as vascular as your muscles are, if at all. 100 reps. It may sound like a lot, but keep in mind, a broomstick probably weighs 1 pound, maybe. And if you're reverse band bench pressing with, say, 50 pounds of band tension, it's taking away the entire weight of the bar to where you're specifically just moving your muscles in a range of motion that is specific to your bench press. That's the biggest thing. You're moving your muscles through a range of motion that is specific to your bench press with 0 weight. That's mandatory. If you don't do this, just don't bother doing the program. All this prehab and rehab work is just as, if not more important than the actual bench pressing or squatting. So if you're not going to do the rehab work, don't run this program because it's not going to give you an accurate representation of the benefits of this. Not only is the idea of this to make smarter programming decisions in terms of the exercise selection, it's to put the accessory work and the prehab and rehab in there as well so that you don't get injured. It's still going to be very hard, but please do the accessory work. Do not skip any of this. Now, just to, and the squat will follow a similar progression in terms of like the movement. So we'll start off with reducing range of motion / central fatigue, self-limiting version, competition movement, self-limiting version number 2. The competition bench day and the self-limiting bench press variation day, that's all you're going to do that day. The reason being is that I want you to save as much juice for your primary bench day as possible. So that means the day prior, when you do your secondary bench, that you just don't do any other movements. You're not spending any time in the gym, any mental energy, any calories, any glycogen, anything that can be used as a training resource that will then go into your primary bench day. And likewise, after your primary bench day, you're not doing shit else. If you want to do reverse band bench, you can do it again on primary bench day. But in terms of any other accessories, you're not doing anything again until Monday or whenever's the next day you're going to bench. You're trying to reduce as much training stress as possible, leading back into your next primary bench day. Rest on these bench press sets, by the way, is infinite. So take as much as you need to get it done. Squats. So Bulletproof Smolov for squats. We're starting off with belt squats. The reason being is that you want something when you come in that's sort of not easy, but it's not really fatiguing, moving into more fatiguing variations. And then when you move into week 2, you want something that is going to reduce training stress and training fatigue. Belt squats are perfect for that. Same set, same rep, same exertion. All that's the same as the base level of Smolov. Decompression work, weighted pull-ups. You still want to work your upper back, your traps, your lats. All those are important factors that come into being stable on a squat. It's the added bonus of further decompressing you from your primary squat day coming into week 2. Spanish squats, stationary biking, and light leg extensions and hamstring curls. This is just as important for squat as the reverse band bench pressing is, and the curls are for your bench press. Spanish squats, you rig up a band on your rack, you put it behind your knees, you use the band as leverage, and you squat. It pumps so much blood into your knees. It's going to feel so good. It's going to help prevent any quad tendon pain, any patellar tendonitis, anything that's going to fuck your knee up. Same thing with the stationary biking. Stationary biking is the only exercise you can do that easily allows you to put your leg through knee extension and knee flexion thousands of times without any training fatigue. A warm-up set of 10 with just the bar does not compare to getting on the stationary bike and just pedaling for 10 or 20 minutes. It's incomparable. The stationary bike is almost worth more than any of the other prehab that you can do specific for your legs just by itself. If your gym doesn't have access to a stationary bike, which I don't know why it wouldn't, but for example, if you train at home, you can just sub that out with a light leg extension and hamstring curl superset. If you do the light hamstring curl and light leg extension superset, just like with the broomstick bench press that you're doing if you can't set up the reverse band bench press, you're not putting any weight on it. You are quite literally just getting on to the leg extension that's on the opposite end of your bench, or if you have a machine or you have bands or whatever, you're taking your lightest band or you're putting no weight on it and you're doing leg extensions. You're basically just flicking your leg out and then flicking your leg back in a movement pattern that's specific to knee extension and knee flexion. And that's it. You're going to do it for 10 minutes just like you were going to do the stationary bike for 10 minutes. So if it becomes difficult, like you get a muscle pump, you're using too much weight. Zero weight. That means zero. Don't put any plates on it. Moving into the tertiary squat day. There's two things you can do here. Now, just for the low equipment level gym goers and like home gym people specifically, tempo squat is going to be the option that you're going to use, obviously, because you don't have access to a safety bar squat bar. Preferably, if you have access to the SSB, you're going to want to use that just because it's going to remove any undue stress on your shoulders. Now, typically, safety bar squats are more fatiguing than like a back squat if you try to do the same load. However, as I stated above with the bench press, you're taking 75% of your best safety squat, SSB squat, not 75% of your best squat. We're just matching exertion. These exertions are specific to the exercise. So take 75% of your best SSB squat, do it here. Likewise, take 75% of your best tempo squat, do that. There are benefits to doing either. So rep quality is going to be very important when you do any sort of squatting frequency like this, because you want to make sure that all your prime movers are getting used accordingly and that your squats aren't turning into good mornings. Likewise, that you're still using your lower back when necessary on a squat. You want to keep it balanced and as textbook as possible. Tempo squat is a much lighter variation than your competition style squat. It also enforces that rep quality. So record yourself doing this. If you're doing tempo squats and you're reinforcing that bad movement pattern, just take some weight off the bar. The main idea with this is to just reinforce your technique if you're using the tempo squat. Likewise, if you're using the SSB squat, it's to take stress off your shoulders. Talked about this a little bit earlier, but then as far as the accessory work for this day, you're working your hamstrings pretty hard on a hamstring curl. You're doing body weight back extensions, and then you're working your upper back because you need to keep your hamstrings strong, you need to keep your lower back safe, and you need to keep your shelf strong as well. These are all pretty much maintenance volumes. You don't need to do much to maintain your muscularity, but you need to maintain it at a minimum while you do this. Secondary squat day. So unlike the bench press, on these days, you're going to be doing rehab and prehab work after you do your competition style squatting and your pause squat. But you're not doing any other accessory work that's muscular, that builds or maintains any muscular capacity, because that all takes energy. You've already budgeted all your other accessory energy towards these other 2 days. Here you're just squatting. Stationary biking goes without saying. We already talked about that. And then on your primary squat day, just like with the bench press day, you're trying to reduce as much stress as possible going back into your fourth most important squat or bench workout. So you're doing all the same rehab work that you've become accustomed to as you've ran this program. You're also doing weighted dead hangs with straps so that your grip isn't an issue with 90% of your weighted pull-up. As well, you're going to do belt squat decompression, where you literally just load up your belt squat and you stand there so that it can decompress your spine. And then you're doing the Spanish squats as well. Key things to note, just as a review before I close the video off. The considerations that you want to make if you have to modify any of this. Movement variation. Any variance that you use or you make to this program, it has to be specific to the lift that you're trying to increase while also reducing overall stress where it needs to be. So on the fourth and third squat and bench press days, these variations should be self-limiting and they should be reducing fatigue. You have your competition style bench or squat day, and then you have your harder version of squat and bench that you use on Friday to build more strength. For example, for squats, on Monday you could use a free weighted belt squat on plyo boxes if you don't have access to a belt squat machine. You don't do front squats here. Well, you might be saying, oh, well, it's keeping me more upright, and blah, blah, blah. A front squat is not, it does not reach the specificity requirements that you'd need for it to have merit in this program. Which, to be honest with you, belt squats don't either. But it has the huge benefit of you being able to push your quads through an equal level of exertion with similar loading to a back squat while also reducing stress. A front squat there is not a good option because, one, you're not moving your quads through really even a remotely equivalent absolute load, because through running this program, you're just going to be fatigued in general. So your ability to hold your front rack position more than likely is going to be greatly deteriorated, making it a good morning front squat. And that's just not a good idea to put there. So don't put front squats anywhere here unless you have Chinese weightlifter or Japanese weightlifter leverages. Like you were born to front squat. That is the only reason you'd front squat. Now, in terms of overall prehab and rehab work, this is pretty universal to most people. I don't foresee anybody needing to make any changes there. But if you wanted to add more for your pecs, your pec minor, you could rub like a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball into your pec minor. And if you're not familiar with anatomy, it's the part of your chest attaching into your shoulder, your anterior shoulder. Grip widths on bench press. That's going to vary depending upon what you're stronger or weaker at. So, we'll just go back up to the bench day, for example. For your fourth most important bench day, which is the first bench day, if you're stronger at close grip, like a closer grip, and this is all within one thumb grip width. So take your widest grip, take it a thumb closer or a thumb wider. That's what I mean when I say close or wide. It doesn't mean put your hands all the way out to touch the collars. It doesn't mean put your finger on the smooth, because those won't have any carryover to your competition bench. You need to keep it specific. And then you use the opposite grip on your tertiary bench day. And that's all. You don't have to make very many changes to this other than like specific like rowing variations or vertical pull, which is why I say of your choice. Because all these movements, to be honest with you, you should be able to do at your gym. The only movement that might be problematic for you is if you're a parallel run bench presser and you want to do board press. In that case, I would say, so you can't do a board press. Pin press wouldn't be a good idea because of the fatigue on your joints. You could do weighted push-ups instead, where you're instead of touching your chest to the ground, you have maybe a weight plate or weight plates to where when you touch your chest to that plate, you can reach a parallel depth on the weighted push-ups. And then you would again just use a closer or wider grip depending upon what's stronger for you that day. And then use the opposite grip on your tertiary bench day. But that's it. That's the Bulletproof Smolov program. It's going to be time-stamped for you guys to watch that and to be able to skip to any part that you want to watch. Let me know what other either program modifications or reviews that you just want to see me do in the future. I'm going to leave you guys to try this program. It's 3 weeks. So all the same progression that you would do on a Smolov program, which essentially that's you add 5 pounds to each of these linearly every week, 5 or 10. You still do that. You still use a training max to calculate all these things. So don't use a 100% your best 1 rep max. Use like 90%, because otherwise this shit's going to creep up on you very quickly. But that's all, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.